Gentlemen, Michelle Bachmann.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here for the Values Voters Summit. I don't know if you noticed on your program right now, Miley Cyrus was supposed to be up here speaking, and they made me the substitute. So I hope that's okay for you this afternoon. Okay, so here was the story. I was out walking, minding my own business, as I usually do in the morning. I'm usually causing trouble in D.C., but in the mornings, I go out and I walk, and I usually am walking somewhere around the National Mall and somewhere around the memorials. So I was out walking, as I said, minding my own business, enjoying the beautiful day. It was about 80 degrees out, and all of a sudden on my phone, in came an email. And it was from one of my fellow colleagues, who I'm sure you all know and love, Steve King of Iowa. And the email came in, and it said this. It said that there was an honor flight coming in to the World War II Memorial. And he said that there are barricades up, and there will be many, many of our finest generation that will be there, the greatest generation. And it was an all-points bulletin for members of Congress to come and face down the National Park Service and open up the World War II Memorial. So I went in my mom clothes. That's what I walk around in the morning. I went over to the memorial, and I went from the back side, and I couldn't believe my eyes, because here were tour buses facing the World War II Memorial, a fairly narrow strip of sidewalk, and iron barricades that had been set up with police tape. So I pulled out my camera. I took the photos because I thought, when are you ever going to see World War II vets shut out of their own memorial? My stepdad had just taken an honor flight as an 89-year-old together with my 88-year-old uncle. Highlight of their life, my uncle had subsequently passed away from taking that honor flight, and I thought to myself, really? You would say no to an 84 to a 99-year-old and prevent them from coming in and seeing their own monument? So I ran over. Louis Gohmert had his scissors. Steve was standing next to the barrier. I yelled, "Charge!" and away we go, and we open the barriers. You can try your petty tyrannies, but you're never going to succeed. Every single day since that fateful morning, we have had members of Congress at the honor flights, including this last Saturday. Steve King told me that there were going to be 10 honor flights coming that day, and did we want to go and take a patriotic tour and make sure that we would be there for every honor flight. So we went down. I had a big contingent from my home state of Minnesota, and we were there to make sure that those memorials were open. But then after we had done our duty, it was actually 90 degrees on Saturday. And by the way, in an additional act of pettiness, the Obama administration also, when it's 90 degrees, decided to turn off the water fountains on the National Mall on Saturday. But they went one worse. They shut down the public bathrooms that were needed to be required for those who were there, the World War II veterans. And so Steve and I said, let's keep going. We're not done. So we opened up the World War II Memorial, and then we went on to the Vietnam Memorial. The Vietnam Memorial also had barricades around it. And it even went better. It had a National Park Service ranger standing in front. You never see park rangers in front of these memorials, ever. They're open to the public. Then we saw a female police officer holding a German Shepherd. You want to talk about an act of intimidation to keep people out. And we said, what's going on, officer? Why aren't the people allowed to come in? said, well, the memorials are closed, and I'm volunteering. And so I said to him, you volunteer to do this? So after that, we asked him who's allowed to come in because they had a narrow opening. They said those who went to serve in Vietnam and the family members of those who lost people on the wall. Now think of the discretion. I give you just this example. Think of the discretion and the power that the commander-in-chief has arrogated to himself, and that's our symbol. That's our symbol. And so Steve and I said, no, this is a First Amendment right to come into this memorial. We physically lifted up the iron barriers. We put them to the side. We said, come in, one and all. This is your memorial. You're Americans, and come on in. Hundreds of individuals came into that memorial. And then we decided to leave and see what was happening at the Korean Memorial. That is a very difficult memorial to put barricades around, but the Park Service managed to do it. We walked up again to the ranger. We asked the ranger what was going on. We heard the same song and dance. So once again, we had Americans in wheelchairs and mothers with baby strollers. And so we did the same thing. We opened up that barrier and we got the Korean War Memorial open, and people were able to go in and they were able to go out. From there we walked over to the Lincoln Memorial, one of the most infamous memorials to see yellow police tape barricading as well as barricades. As Steve and I stood in front of the memorial, we saw a grandmother and a grandfather with their 10-year-old grandson. And they said to us, you know, we asked our grandson on his 10th birthday, which was last Saturday, where would you like to go for your 10th birthday? He could have gone anywhere in the United States. He could have gone to Disneyland. But he told us he wanted to see the Lincoln Memorial. And we're here today for our grandson. We don't know what to do. So I turned to Steve and I said, you know what we got to do? And he's not going to fight anymore with me. So we went up to the barrier. A woman was listening to us. Steve had his wire cutters in his pocket because that's what we need now. And so we went up to the barrier, and one woman said, this one doesn't have any wire on it. So once again, Steve and I lifted up the iron barriers. We moved them aside. We took our scissor. We cut the police tape. He and I went up the steps. We had some other people with us. We said, come on, let's go up. Let's take this hill. 600 Americans took the Lincoln Memorial on Saturday. We took that hill. And this is the police lineup tape. This is our consolation prize. And so the Obama administration, this is our symbol. You see, the Obama administration is turning us into a police line. I say we are not a police line. You can choose that, or, Mr. President, you can choose to follow Article 2 in the Constitution of the United States. Because you have absolutely no right to arrogate that level of power to yourself, just like we saw this last week with a private inn, the Pisgah Inn on the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina. We had heard from Mark Meadows, the members of Congress, last Friday morning that unbelievably the United States government was going to shut down a private inn with no federal money and no federal employees. We heard that Friday morning. That afternoon, I picked up my phone in my office. I called the owner of the Pisgah Inn. I said, your member of Congress, Mark Meadows, told us your predicament. I want you to know that there are members of Congress who will stand with you. At 1:15 in the afternoon, the owner said to me, well, you better act quick because there's blue lights flashing in my driveway right now. They're shutting the gates to my hotel. So I told him, grab your cell phone camera, go out, take pictures of what's going on, and you show America what's happening to a private business owner. That afternoon, I called my husband. I said, now think of this. This is the 18th government shutdown since the time of Jimmy Carter. Although some people say the 4 years of Jimmy Carter was probably the longest American shutdown. But I called my husband and I said to him, now just think, in the next shutdown, we own 2 private health clinics. And I said, now imagine, Obamacare came online during this shutdown. So in the future, presumably, people will purchase health insurance, if they can get to them, in these private exchanges. So in the future, in a shutdown, will we see another President Obama move where he puts padlocks on a private clinic like ours just because we might be able to take insurance? Will they stop a kidney transplant just in process? Will they stop a scheduled C-section in process? What will they do? Who would have ever thought you'd shut down the Lincoln Memorial or the World War II Memorial? Who would have thought they'd ever shut down pheasant season in Minnesota after you've already bought your permit? Who would have thought on a state highway in front of Mount Rushmore there'd be barriers and cones so that people couldn't get in on a state highway pullout to be able to see Mount Rushmore? Who would have ever thought it? Well, I love the fight of people in South Dakota because they removed the cones, they removed the barriers. The Obama administration put it back. 4 feet of snow fell and the snow plows pushed the cones and the barriers down the canyon. Take that. This is our book. You see, this is a big fight. We're supposed to be ashamed that this fight is about Obamacare. I'm not. I'm not ashamed. When Obamacare passed, I was there that night, grieving, weeping on the floor when Obamacare passed in the House of Representatives. I had made the first call to the American people, and I called you all to come into Washington, D.C., to look at the whites of the eyes of the members of Congress and say to them, not with my health care, you don't. 40,000 of you responded and came to Washington, D.C. That created the rise of the Tea Party, and that created the victory that pulled the gavel out of Nancy Pelosi's hand in 2010. That was the Tea Party that did that. The night that Obamacare passed, I turned to Mike Pence on the floor, now the governor of the state of Indiana, and I said, Mike, we have to tell the American people that we haven't waved the flag of surrender on socialized medicine. I said, somebody's got to introduce the bill to repeal it. He said, go for it, Michelle. I did. I went back to my office, wrote the repeal bill, and I was the first one on the floor the next morning. I introduced the repeal bill. Steve King later that day also introduced a repeal bill. We've been fighting ever since. This is consequential because it is life and death for the American people and for the American economy. It's worth fighting over. But this fight that we're in right now is far bigger than even the Obamacare fight. Far bigger. It's far bigger than the national bankruptcy that is impending upon our nation right now, that is putting our children's future at risk. It's bigger than the debt. It's bigger than the spending. Because I submit to you today, what is at risk in all of this is whether we will be the police line state or whether we will be a constitutional republic. It is that grave and that consequential. Because an election was had. The results weren't what we all wanted to see, but an election was had. We have a Democrat president. We have a Democrat-controlled Senate. But we have a Republican-controlled House. Yes. By virtue of the election of the American people, they said we will have a divided government. And a divided government we have. And we will not silence the voice of the American people in this fight. Because you see, if the president can be petty as he is, you see it firsthand in these death benefits that are denied to the fallen. It wasn't enough to leave our men on the field in Benghazi. Now he is using our soldiers as political pawns. This is the height of throwing under the bus some of the most innocent victims that there are. We do not forget, and we do stand And we do fight. And I say to you all, this isn't the time for caving. This is the time for standing. And I am proud of the leadership in the House. Usually I'm fighting the leadership in the House, like about 99% of the time. I am here to say to you, I've been extremely proud that we have stood. Because what I have seen is that fight and resolve that says the people count. And you've got to pay attention. That's why, to me, when it comes to Obamacare, I have stood for repeal. I have begged for defund. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Mike. I have stood for that. But I believe what we must stand for now is to make sure that Obamacare is voluntary for everyone in the United States. The best line this week was, how could we possibly force 100% of Americans to be taxed to pay for a product they don't want to buy from a website that does not work? And so, therefore, whether you are a big business, whether you are a small business, whether you are an average American, which is the greatest thing in the world to be, whether you are a doctor, a nurse, a medical device manufacturer, an insurer, whoever you are, this egregious system that will be ultimately known as death care must be defeated. And you see, this is our line in the sand of police state versus constitutional republic. This is it. When the federal government controls your health care, they literally control life and death. And so I say we should do no less than demand that President Obama allow Obamacare to be voluntary for every American. No forcing anyone to go into this system. If you thought the NSA was looking at your private data, you haven't seen anything until these federal data private hubs are created. I'll end with this. You see, it was 1,281 years ago today that Charles Martel won the victory at Tours. That day changed the course of history. For 100 years, the Islamic marauders had won battle after battle after battle and were moving their fear and their tyranny across the world. You see, Charles Martel stood up against that. The famous, brilliant Victor Davis Hanson wrote an article. This military historian told us about what this meant for the rise of modern Europe. You see, it was the persecution and it was the suffering that was brought about by this Islamic insurgency that brought about the unity from Charles Martel, where they literally stood shoulder to shoulder with their shields up and their javelins pointed. And they won that decisive battle. And Charlemagne became the father of modern Europe. And Christian Europe and the values of Christian Europe prevailed and ultimately led to those same immigrants coming to the United States and creating this magnificent country. You see, battles count. You need to know when to fight. This is the time to fight. This is our moment for posterity. And I thank God that we finally have the will to stand up, take on this oppressive president, and stand for what is good and righteous and true. It's the battle of our time. You choose. You choose. It's the battle of our time. God bless you and God bless the United States of America. God bless you.